So, do you think you've had any fermented foods today or maybe yesterday? You might be surprised by the number of foods that we eat that are fermented foods. For example, there is beer and wine, cheeses are fermented foods, yogurt, of course, breads are made with microorganisms, right? Yeast, that's a fermented food, vinegar, chocolate is a fermentation process, even coffee is a fermentation process. So you can see a lot of the foods that we consume every day are actually fermented foods, not just things like yogurt. So we've talked about lactic acid bacteria and the role it plays in making yogurt. It's also used in other foods, for example, making sourdough bread, as well as traditional pickling. Now, these microorganisms, I'm going to argue, are the tiniest chefs in our kitchen. They can really transform foods, and they're important to know how to utilize to do that transformation. We've already pointed out all the different types of foods that we transform using these microorganisms. And lactic acid bacteria is just one example of a microorganism. There's also yeast, which we've already talked about in this class, and we use that in bread making. And then we also use molds for those who love soy sauce. That's the product of fermentation via mold. So these are all examples of microorganisms that we use to make the foods we eat. Now, how do we envision fermentation? What is it? What does it look like? Well, it involves these microorganisms, and in particular, it involves these microorganisms consuming larger molecules, like our lactose sugars that we saw in the yogurt, digesting them, and that digestion process makes smaller molecules. So it could make some acids, which lowers the pH of a substance, or it could create gas, like in yeast, which then inflates our breads. It could make alcohols, which then we consume in beer and wine, or it could make some aromas and flavors like we would see in soy sauce. So in summary, these microorganisms through fermentation, which is just them eating up these large molecules, digesting them, and then turning them into smaller molecules, which then transform the food that's being fermented. Now, how do they chop up these large molecules into small molecules? What is the process? What is the little knife set that they use as these small chefs in our kitchens? And the answer to that are enzymes. So the way that the driving force behind fermentation are the enzymes that are inside the microorganisms. And enzymes are proteins. Proteins are these large molecules. And those proteins are great at breaking up large molecules and breaking them up in particular ways. We actually already talked about enzymes when we talked about lactose intolerance. If you're lactose intolerant, that means you do not have the enzymes in your small intestine to digest lactose, milk sugar. If you did have those enzymes, then we can think about that enzyme like lactase coming in, taking a molecule of lactose and breaking it into two, which is the act of digestion. So it's these enzymes which play a key role in our microorganisms. They're the ones that break up the molecules, like we just saw with the milk sugar, into smaller molecules. I just want to give a shout out to a great book that's out there, The Art of Fermentation. you're interested in fermentation and trying different types of fermentation, making your own kombucha or kefir, this is a wonderful book to read. It's well regarded in the field and very informative.